Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. We are lucky to have returning guest and journalist Tareq Haddad, who's been covering the Assange trial. We've had him on the show before, and I just wanted to bring you on to give our audience an update. We obviously yesterday he was denied bail, but on Monday they denied extradition to the United States. So as somebody that's covering it, first of all, walk us through kind of what happened yesterday and Monday, and then kind of give us the sense of what do you think? Because this is a peculiar strategy from, I'm not sure what they're going for, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll probably start with Monday just as it makes a bit more sense. I attended the hearing by the video link this time just because of it was a bit uncertain whether I'd be able to get in the court. Obviously, a lot of COVID regulations, and seemed like a lot of people were queuing, and it just seemed like it was going to be kind of a more risky strategy in terms of covering it. So I just thought kind of take the more conservative approach, and just to make sure I've definitely got access, because I knew that I would definitely have access via the video link. But yeah, covered the hearing on Monday. Kind of as soon as it started, I kind of very quickly got a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to go very well. Every single point that the defense had argued in September, it kind of just was one by one just kind of dismissed by the judge in the case. And at points it was so towards the US that she was, to me, because I'd spent the last week or so kind of preparing for the hearings, I was reading through all the closing submissions and stuff. It was almost as if she was, directly quoting the US prosecution's closing submissions, and she used, several of the arguments that they raised in her final ruling. So yeah, it was, kind of got that feeling as I'm sort of taking my notes of everything that, this is definitely not going very well. And then to everyone's surprise, she kind of just made this sudden kind of flip into to deny the extradition based on medical grounds, based on his mental health. That, as I'm sure everyone's seen, that kind of this prolonged period of isolation has obviously had a quite detrimental impact, and then it was prevented that sending him to the US would be oppressive, as is the statutory language, would it be oppressive to his mental health, and substantially kind of increase the risk of suicide, or there is a substantial risk of suicide if he's sent. So very surprising ruling, but a welcome one, but with its kind of drawbacks. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the kind of discussions about it. I think it's, personally, very good for Assange himself, but in terms of journalism itself, it's quite a troubling ruling in terms of, all of the legal arguments were accepted. The kind of the precedent is now there, even though the actual extradition isn't going to go forward. Hopefully, fingers, depending on.
So again, I want to go into that a little deeper right now, because you bring all that up, because it's not a small thing that the judge listed, as you said, basically the American State Department's points of, their prosecution points. So, before we get into the bail hearing yesterday, what is the significance, even though can't be extradited, what is the significance of the judge saying, oh yeah, basically saying, he's not protected under freedom of press, and all the points that she made? Because the way she was reading it, I was reading people who, like Susie Dawson and others who were covering it real time, it was like, oh, brace yourself, she's gonna say he's getting extradited. But just from a quick legal standpoint, what does this mean that she listed off all these things basically in favor of the prosecution?
It means, I think, a couple of things. In terms of, for Assange himself, it means that the appeal situation is quite precarious, because it's not kind of like we've got these 5 or 6 different arguments that she ruled in favor of to say that he can't be extradited. She picked this kind of one singular point, which, not to kind of diminish its importance, it obviously is an important point, and I think she did make the right judgment on that. But the fact that it's only one out of kind of a handful of things, I think, makes me personally quite nervous for the appeals process, because and just on the bail hearing yesterday, we got a flavour of what the US the prosecutors on behalf of the US, what they're going to argue, and the things that they're going to bring forward. And yeah, it doesn't give you too much kind of confidence in that. And then I guess there's the sort of wider issue in terms of other journalists going forward, in terms of it's not guaranteed that someone else in that position will have similar mental health. So for what's going to be stopping them being sent to the US if they're kind of charged under similar circumstances.
Okay, so then let's talk about that. Since the ruling yesterday in the bail trial, as you say, is giving us a kind of a flavor of what the US prosecution is going to go for, how does, in addition to what was said in the ruling Monday, how does the Wednesday being denied bail, what specifically did the judge say, first of all, and then how will this affect the appeals process?
Mm-hmm. So Wednesday kind of started off the usual way with prosecution laying out their case, why he should not be granted bail, and then the defense gave their reasons, and then Judge Baresa gave her ruling, which came fairly rapidly, kind of indicating that she, again, I think her decision was made based off of the submissions that she'd been given, so it wasn't too much for her to decide on the actual day. And basically the reasoning was based on all the previous history of trying to evade justice in terms of the Swedish proceedings and how he went into the Swedish embassy, and then also what played quite a significant role is the assistance that Assange gave to Edward Snowden in getting him from Hong Kong to Russia, and the US prosecution used that to illustrate the amount of resources and support that Julian Assange has, and that that those things are still at his fingertips. And so if he was to consider kind of fleeing, again, the argument is that he still does have a lot of support in terms of WikiLeaks and public support and all that kind of thing. So that went against his favor. What the defense argued is that obviously, and I think it was a very valid point, but not accepted, is that actually Assange is now safest in the United Kingdom, because now we have this court order saying that extradition is barred. He is now safe in this territory. If he's discharged in the UK courts, it's much more difficult for him then to be rearrested under the same circumstances. Whereas if he travels to somewhere else, it's kind of carte blanche for the US to arrest him again, or kind of use the security forces of another country to arrest him. Whereas in the UK, he would technically be protected, because the court would be he'd be under the protection of the court. And I think also it'd be very brazen from the US to actually kind of go after him again after that court order, because it would just kind of show a flagrant dismissal of what the UK court said. So that's what the defense argued, that actually now his incentive to abscond is gone, because he's now actually the safest in the UK. They mentioned the points about his partner Stella Morris and his 2 young children. Again, that didn't really have too much sway with the judge. She's an extradition judge, and she said this part and parcel of extradition proceedings. I think it must happen in almost every case. You can imagine that when there's an extradition, there's always a family that's affected. And they kind of some low blows from the US prosecution is saying that Assange started this family when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, knowing that his future is very uncertain. And that's not things that are very great to hear, but I guess that's their job. He's proceeding.
So even the fact that the defense said he has no incentive to leave the UK because it's the safest place for him right now.
Mhm.
The judge still then denied the bail.
Yeah.
And what was the like concise reasoning for that?
I think basically he's considered a flight risk. I think what they just try and memorize exactly what she said. So the US now has a right of appeal, and that if Assange decides to flee again, they would not be given their right of appeal. And so that was given as the reason to ensure that the US has their sort of fair chance to appeal, because they might not get that right if he doesn't stick around for the appeal proceedings. And then there's also other things that were mentioned, I think, that were quite important, and just for people to know generally, is that, the point that was raised by the defense is that it's once you're discharged, the quote from Edward Fitzgerald, QC, representing Assange, said that almost every canon of English law says that once you're discharged, you should, it's kind of expected that you have liberty, at least to some extent. Obviously, in Assange's case, they were putting forward quite a stringent package, so it was by no means that he was going to be a free man. It was going to be, strict house arrest with a ankle monitoring system, and having to pay sureties of, I don't actually know the exact figure that was put up this time, but when we had a similar situation in 2011 with the Swedish proceedings, I think Assange put up over £200,000. So you'd expect it to be in a similar ballpark. But all those kind of precautions were dismissed, and I guess from the court's perspective, you can almost see why, because it's very similar package to what was all the securities that were given in 2011. I don't think too much has changed, because it's as maximal as possible. I don't know what more you can do other than house arrest and checking into a police station every 24 hours and an ankle monitoring system. What more can you do to say that you're staying where you are? And another point that was raised is that the technology for monitoring people has improved, so it's in real time as opposed to kind of having a slight lag. But it was very disappointing. But to be honest, I was expecting that ruling, and woke up on Wednesday with a kind of pretty low feeling in my stomach, thinking this was likely going to be the case.
So what this means then is he has to stay in prison until the appeal happens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still quite uncertain how long that will take. I've heard, 6 months. I've heard 2 years. I think it probably is kind of towards the lower end of that spectrum. But again, it's he's at the moment he's being solely held for these US charges, so he's not convicted of anything. There's nothing essentially pending that he's accused of. So he's literally just being held for the US to appeal, which is, I don't think I've really ever seen another case like that, where you are discharged by the court and there's an order for discharge, but you're not actually allowed to leave prison. So it's quite a unique situation, but I think something we'll have to kind of continue talking about and fighting for, because essentially he's arbitrarily detained, and it's continuing the arbitrary detention.
Jesus.
A lot to take in.
I mean, yeah, so it's like Monday, the no extradition was a kind of a small win, but then ultimately he's still going to be in Belmarsh prison.
That's the case, yeah, and I think a few people have made this point that it does seem to be sort of punishment by process as opposed to actually being sentenced, and I think that's kind of in line with some of the leaked documents that we saw in the past, that it's in terms of kind of US interest. It doesn't matter so much where he's held as long as he's in prison somewhere. And I think, yeah, they're definitely achieving that with this case, with the way that they've handled it. And I know in the past I've been someone to kind of steer people away from speculating about the court by actually kind of following Monday's proceedings. You did kind of feel like there was something going on in the background that influenced some of these findings. Just, it was kind of so incoherent how everything went in the US's favor, and then this kind of, on this point, it was kind of denied. And it almost makes me think that I would hate for this situation to happen, but it was almost done on purpose this way, because, for example, because now that it's gone in Assange's favor, they can't really appeal any of the other points that went. I have to check this, but they can't appeal the points that went against them in terms of all the rulings that the rates are made. They went in favor of the US, but now there's no really chance of appeal for that. The only kind of the issues that will come up in the appeal will be just this one point. So it's kind of like, this is all accepted now, and then this is the single point of challenge. And then, like I said earlier, it can be quite, just increases the chances that it can be overturned. The only positive things, I think, is that it's, I'm basing this off what the kind of lawyers said in court. I don't think there's ever been a decision that's been overturned based on Section 91, which is the section of the law that prevented Assange from being extradited. That's the one to do with mental health, etc. So there's been a few decisions that have prevented people from being extradited on that thing, and it's never been overturned at appeal. So that's one kind of positive factor in this. But again, it could take a few more months that Assange is kept in this situation, and someone who's that's spoken about his mental health. I can't imagine anything worse than having that kind of decision on Monday, and then you're kind of brought back down to pretty crappy place on Wednesday. So and the only other thing I'll add is that London is really freezing right now. It's so cold. I feel bad sometimes that I kind of wake up in the morning and my instinct is to complain, but I've got a nice bed and central heating, etc. Situation in Belmarsh, I can only imagine is much worse. So yeah, it's still not a great situation, unfortunately.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like Wednesday's bail ruling was sort of revealing their long play of we're going to just keep them in prison as long as we can, regardless of, and because the main thing is to dissuade any other whistleblowers, really. I mean, that seems like to me is the point of the United States empire, is to say, well, this is what happens if you reveal our war crimes or whatever, is we're just going to make you rot in prison as long as we possibly can, and just do this. I mean, because I didn't have a lot of faith in this female judge at all. And it feels, that feels accurate after yesterday. And there's no appeal process for the bail, right? Like once the ruling on the bail is made, it's it?
No, there will be, actually. I forgot to mention that. So, and because that's, I guess, a more timely issue, we're expecting that as soon as next week, actually. So that's also another, I guess, grain of hope for us, is that as early as next week, that decision will get a second hearing. So yeah, we're still waiting for confirmation about that. I sent a few emails to the lawyers today, but I haven't heard anything back. But yeah, hopefully that's very early. And again, just these on bail applications, these things are kind of given priority because it's to do with liberty and that kind of thing, whereas actually appealing a whole decision takes a few more months, and obviously there's a lot more preparation that kind of goes into it, whereas with bail it tends to be a much kind of quicker turnaround, and that is a positive thing.
What So I don't know how this process works in the UK, but will it be the same judge for the bail appeal hearing?
I don't believe so. No, it will go to the High Court. So, and I believe that District Judge Barata is only at the forgetting the word, the lower level of the court. Sorry, the magistrate's court. Sorry, completely blanked on the word. Yeah, it will be a different judge, definitely, and I think actually it will be 3 judges if it does go to appeal. There's a step before it even gets accepted for appeal. Is first there's a decision on whether the application is accepted or not. I think it might be a little bit different with appeals. With bail. I know with the actual decision regarding the appealing of the decision, it will take an application before it, and then that has to be approved or declined before the actual appeals hearing takes place. Whereas with bail, because I think it might be a much more simpler issue, it might just be kind of straight to a hearing with a judge or 3 judges. I've never actually covered any appeals before, so that'll be kind of a first if that happens. So it'll be interesting to see. But
so when do you think we would have an answer if there's going to be a bail appeal hearing, and when it would be?
Yes, I don't have a date confirmed, but it would be expecting it to be scheduled next week, early part of next week, and it would be, I mean, if the decision goes in Assange's favour, he would be released immediately, or within a few hours, etc. If it's not, we'd have to wait for. I don't think he'd have another sort of chance to, secure his liberty until the appeal process is complete.
Okay. So, I mean, having covered this whole case this whole time, many times you were actually in the courtroom, and I know because of COVID you were doing this virtually this time, but it obviously feels like, as you've said, and others of us in the pro-Assange camp have said, that obviously the State Department is wielding a lot of power, not just obviously with their lawyers pushing their prosecution claims, but it feels like this judge, this woman who read that on Monday and then denied extradition, obviously she's getting orders or being pushed by forces. She's not coming to this decision on her own. So it doesn't feel like to me. I mean, what are you getting, having been there and seeing it?
Yeah,
from that.
I always resisted that temptation to say that, just because I don't want to say anything I kind of don't specifically know. And I think, to be fair to her, she could have extradited him, and she didn't. So I think credit should be given where it's due, even though it might be fractional. And I remember actually vividly kind of having this thought, is that her voice was actually trembling. She's quite an assured, she's a judge and former barrister, she's quite an assured woman, confident and very sort of direct and commands a lot of authority. But her voice was actually, trembling as she was giving that final part where she was saying that he wouldn't be extradited. I thought it was quite a fascinating moment. She was actually, I think, forget what word it was, but there was a long pause before she actually said the final words. She was kind of halfway through her sentence and then stopped and kind of slowly got it out. And it was, really kind of telling. I don't know, telling of what, but it was telling of something that, there must have been a lot of emotions and things going through her mind at that point in time.
Well, that's fascinating. See, that's the thing we're not going to get just reading about this, is that obviously, yeah, if you're a judge, you're going to be pretty assertive. And so she read all of the other stuff fairly in her traditional sort of assertive manner. And then when she gets to he's not going to be extradited, her voice was trembling.
Yeah, I mean, maybe trembling's a bit too strong, but there was like a slight kind of slight stammering and kind of, uneasiness about it, or kind of uncertainty. But I mean, it is a big decision to make, and I think it was courageous of her to do that. Obviously, would have liked the other points of law to be dealt with in a more equitable way, but unfortunately not. And I guess the other point that's worth mentioning is that obviously me and you have talked a lot about the sort of spying in the embassy and UC Global and a lot of these assassination plots, etc. The kind of another disappointing part of the ruling was that this was almost completely ignored and even almost justified, saying that she actually used a CNN article that was, I'm sure you probably remember this, that said that Assange had turned the Ecuadorian embassy into sort of his command station for kind of election meddling, etc. She used that as justification for saying that, this is probably why the US did what they did, and it's within their right, which is completely legally untrue. It's a breach of Geneva Conventions on Diplomacy, and aside from the breaches on Assange's personal rights and his sort of attorney privilege rights.
Okay. I mean, yeah, there's so many things that have just been, like you said, ignored, and how the U.S. has treated him and just abandoned all sorts of rights. So I don't know, man. Yeah, and I can respect the fact that you, as a journalist, don't want to get into.
I mean, yeah, if I had the information, I would of course be more than willing to provide it. But it's just I try and not say things that I don't know to be true.
Right.
All I would say is that, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on your show before. Actually, it's probably worth mentioning, is that in the last few months or so, I've started to work with a group of investigative journalists. We're going to be focusing sort of solely on the Assange case, and part of what we're doing is seeking out sources and information and documents to see if undue pressure was placed. So perhaps it's better to say that it's more of an unanswered question at the moment. I think, in a case of this magnitude, it would probably be naive to say that there's been no political corruption or political manipulation at all. There very well could be, and we'll look for it, and I think it's good to look for it. But as of yet, it's we haven't seen it in this particular case. But it is worth noting, actually, just come to mind, that Stefano Marizzi, who's an Italian journalist who formerly worked for La Repubblica, quite close friends with Assange, spent a lot of time with him in the embassy, etc. She's recently acquired another document by FOIA. She's been having kind of lots of these FOIA battles with the UK Crown Prosecution Service. She's obtained another FOIA, which kind of says that Sweden tried to kind of make sure that he didn't have an appeals process in 2011, so that there is some sort of, so that it wouldn't go to the European Court of Human Rights. So once a decision had made, there was sort of pressure to try and kind of get on with it as soon as possible. So, that's one example where there obviously is some level of political manipulation going on. And yeah, it's likely that it could be the case in the current proceedings, but we have to search them out. And I guess if there's, by happenstance, anyone from the Crown Prosecution Service listening, you want to get in touch about something you've seen, then please get in touch. But
right,
we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now.
And what is the tone of just, I don't know, the people in the court, the people in London, just that since you're there on the ground, is there like an overall sense of this from, I mean, are the people in London like not paying attention to this? Are they like really mad? Or is there a big division? Like, oh, he's guilty, oh, he's innocent. Like, what is your sense of it living in London where all these trials have been taking place?
I generally actually feel that the support for him is quite widespread. I mentioned this even more mainstream newspapers now have become much more vocal than they have been. Perhaps a little bit, it's way too late, but it's, we'll take it. I mean, I know sometimes people will kind of call them out and say, why haven't you been there earlier, etc., which is fair enough. But they're writing editorials, they're writing kind of critical pieces at the moment. So for me, it's worth encouraging. I wasn't actually there on Wednesday, so I didn't kind of get to gauge people's reactions to what happened with the bail hearings. But it is worth noting that the sort of activists and supporters have been, absolutely incredible. The amount of dedication that they give is, I personally couldn't do it. In terms of both Monday and Wednesday, there were people queuing at the court from 4 a.m. And I don't know if you've heard, in the UK now we've got the government keeps making up these different tiers of COVID restrictions that we're, first we had a maximum of 3, and then they invented a tier 4, which was more severe. And in the last few weeks, they've invented another tier 5, which is, even though pretty much all our kind of liberties have been restricted as it is, they've somehow upped it again to the point that, you can't leave except for very few circumstances. But despite that, I'd say, upwards of 100 people were outside the court on both days. Well, on actually Monday, there'd probably be, a few hundred there. Wednesday was probably a similar turnout. I believe actually 7 people got arrested by the police for breaching COVID regulations, and including a 92-year-old man, which I'm not sure if you saw the video or not, but that was kind of going the rounds. And he's another example of someone that's been incredible. Eric Levy deserves a massive applause. He's, every single Saturday he's attending. There's a group of people that go to Belmarsh and they hold a protest there, and then they make their way to Piccadilly Circus in central London. He's there, and then he makes his way to central London. He's at every single court proceedings without fail. At 92 years old, it's quite remarkable. He's got a better attendance record than I do, so have to give it up to him.
Yeah,
so many more like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is the global reach of the Assange supporter is amazing. I was talking to Susie Dawson on Monday when they said he wasn't going to be extradited, and she just said, it's literally millions of people all around the world that have helped push for this, which it is. I mean, it is amazing. I mean, it is like, I've met Assange supporters as a comedian traveling. I mean, in Russia, when we did a tour of shows last November in Australia, I mean, the people for Assange were at every city, and having spoken at an Assange protest in San Francisco a year and a half ago. Like, it is impressive. It is impressive to see. So, and when Susie Dawson brought me in to do Unity for Jay, the people that were on those calls, Chris Hedges, Ray McGovern, Vivian Kubrick, it's impressive. And it also just shows how significant this case is. So, all right. I mean, I appreciate your time, man. And I know it's starting to get a little late there, but just before we go, what are your thoughts on where do you think this is? I know you don't like to get into the prediction game, but just, I mean, because it's not like some sports contest where you just predict it. But what are you seeing, and what do you think that what does the defense have left, in their arsenal for this?
Well, I think now the ball is definitely in Assange's favor in terms of the actual legal proceedings. Like I mentioned before, there's never been a decision that's been overturned on this particular ruling. The case law is quite clear that in terms of on this particular point of law, the weight should be given to the district judge who actually heard all the evidence, because so we had 4 medical experts, 2 for the defense, 2 for the prosecution, and we had also experts talking about the US prison conditions. So when it goes to the appeals judges won't have that information to hand. They'll just they'll have it in statement form and etc. So the norm is to give the weight to the original ruling of the judge, and it's kind of their the presumption is that they've done their job correctly. And I would say they have. Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to kind of look at the actual legal arguments that the prosecution are going to make, because I've taken a note of what they said that they were going to raise, and I want to compare it to what was in Barretta's ruling and in the original submissions about this original point of law. So that will be interesting to see if they do actually genuinely have a case. Very quickly, the defense said that we agree with how the judge kind of ruled on this point. I don't know if it's worth getting into too much of the nitty-gritty, but there's something called so essentially the law that stops Assange being extradited is that the court has to define that it's a substantial risk. It can't just be that there's a tangible, some sort of minuscule risk. It has to be like quote unquote substantial. And then there's a test called the Turner test, which has 6 parts to it, which is how to establish if it's substantial or not. And so in her ruling, Barretta would have kind of gone through those 6 steps and outlined how she's, applied this formula to make her decision. And what the US have said is that they feel that the way she's applied this formula is not how the original ruling was intended. Whereas the defense is saying, she's done the judgment correctly in this case. But I have to actually go and kind of read the specifics of the law and what each side have argued on that point before I can really give any more insight. But I think the ball is in Assange's favour. He's had the order of discharge. It's just kind of the crappy situation of staying in a maximum security prison in these circumstances, which I think is kind of everyone's next kind of goal to get him out.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Tareq, so much for coming on the show, and really appreciate all the work you're doing as a journalist. And where can people check out? Because I know you have written articles, all this. Where can they follow your work?
So it's TareqHaddad.com and on Twitter, Tareq_Haddad.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody, I just put it on the screen right now. You can see his website, TareqHaddad.com. So thank you so much. Appreciate the work you're doing, and we'll have you back on the show, and hopefully it'll be with some good news that he got the bail appeal. He's out and with his family. All right, man. Have a good night. Thanks a lot, Tareq.
Appreciate it.
So that was Tareq Haddad, everybody. Check out his work. If you're new to what he's doing, he's done some fantastic work. He was working for Newsweek and started talking about the OPCW report and how people within the OPCW were not being honest, basically, about the Syria gas attacks. And so he's really done fantastic work, and he's really been one of the many, many indie journalists that have been covering Assange, fairly and on the right side, and not just smear pieces like that CNN piece or whatever. It's all that nonsense. So it's really great to have him on the show. And thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button, go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at grahamelwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.